The Toronto Blue Jays had a franchise-setting pre-All-Star game, which is fantastic. Now let's take a look back. Who was successful? Who wasn't? How can this team get better? And what will continue through the second half of the season? Stick with us on Locked On Blue Jays.
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays. Thank you for making Locked On Blue Jays your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Down on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. As always, I'm Brayden. He's Carter First. You can find us on Twitter at Brayden5 at Carter First 2, as well as our main Twitter account at Locked On Jays. You can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Blue Jays. And if you're new here to YouTube, make sure you do hit the subscribe button. It really does help us out. That's how we grow. That's how we get more Blue Jays fans. So hit that button if you want to stay up to date on all of your Blue Jays news, updates, everything. You get your podcast, your shorts, your live streams, your videos, the whole ordeal. And if you're listening anywhere else, we appreciate that too. But do go ahead over the YouTube page, drop us one anyway. It helps us out and it is free. A lot to get into. Like I said, the Toronto Blue Jays set a franchise record for most wins before the All-Star break. It is a historic season already. What can happen throughout the rest of this year? We're going to talk about all that as the sort of show continues here. We're going to talk standouts. Who did we love this season? Who so far? Who has done their part? Who has gone above and beyond? Who has taken the step forward? We'll talk diamond in the roughs. We'll talk everything. But we have an opportunity here where we can actually take a look back without there being a ton of games on or everything like that. The trade deadline's not quite here yet, so we can take a little bit of time and reminisce on what this season has been already, Carter. And I guess starting it off easy for you, thoughts and feelings on the first half of the season.
I don't know how you can't be pleased with the way things went in the first half, especially the way that the Toronto Blue Jays did it. When you would have thought in this offseason, you would have thought going into the year that Vladdy, Bichette, and Santander would have to carry the team. That's not really what happened. You had George Springer, if anything, carrying the team, as in Barger, coming from a guy that didn't even make the roster on opening day. That has been one of the most important pieces on this Toronto Blue Jays team. So with the way everything has played out, with the way the Toronto Blue Jays have won games and where they sit at the top of the AL East here, it is, I guess, they call it first half, second half. It's not really that. The Jays play 96 games. But through the first half of the season, I guess we'll, continue with those terms. But I don't think you can be anything other than impressed with what the Toronto Blue Jays did.
Yeah, Carter, I 100% agree. How this season started, I don't think I would have been able to predict this. Even through the first month of the year, I think I was like, we'll see. We were battling and clawing between being over 500, being under 500. But really all it takes is one great stretch from the team, and it pushes you so far beyond where maybe you would have been otherwise. So this team was able to do that with their 10-game win streak. And man, it sort of reinvigorated the fan base here. And that's something that I look for, right? When fans start to get more involved, you can not only tell, because me and you, we watch every game. We can tell when this team's getting better or not getting better, but it doesn't necessarily hit me until, the fans online start to come back. People that maybe haven't been around since 2015, 16 start to come back to this team and start to, are looking for more Blue Jays content and find our podcast. People are asking us to come on radio shows because of how excited they are about the Toronto Blue Jays and, whatever it may be. That sort of, I don't know, it just does something else. It's the feeling of community. I think that this team can bring a lot of Canadians together, and not just Canadians. We know a lot of you guys, there's some of you guys that watch this podcast that are from other places all around the world. And we do appreciate all of you watching, but it's a sense of community. And this team has the opportunity to do something special this year. Will it happen? Will it not happen? We'll get into all that, but yeah, it is a great feeling so far.
So there's a lot to talk about for us here. And I think I'm going to start with the superstars on this team, or what they're supposed to be the superstars, the guys that are supposed to carry the Toronto Blue Jays here. And we got to start with the one, the only, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. not having a bad season by any means. That's the weird thing when you talk about Vladdy, is that if you just asked the first-time baseball fan, they looked at Vladdy's stats and be like, hey, this guy's pretty good at baseball. And he is a very good baseball player. But that has kind of been the issue, I guess you could say, with Vladdy this year, is he's been good, but he hasn't been great. He hasn't been elite. He hasn't been putting up those big numbers that we have been hoping to see from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I mean, Aston Barger has, I think, 100 to 150 less at-bats than Vladdy, and he has more home runs than Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at this point. So shout out to Barger, but obviously with Vladdy, like, you don't necessarily want him to have the stats that he has had through the first half of this season. So I got them, or I am pulling them up here. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Again, we just got to see the power come for Vladdy, and we haven't necessarily seen that here yet. And I got Vladdy Sr. actually pulled up. I'm not sure if you have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. stats.
I do.
Quickly over them.
Yeah, I'll go over Vladdy's stats here quick. So in 94 games played, 414 plate appearances, Vladdy has an average of 277, an on-base percentage of 384, a slugging of 434, and an OPS of 818 with 97 hits, 12 home runs, and he's got 46 RBIs. So again, you look at the stats and you're thinking, wow, this, those aren't terrible. But then it seems like you ask Blue Jays fans and everybody's up in arms about Vladdy not being Vladdy. Well, the precedent was set, right, of what we now want to expect. The paycheck is signed, the $500 million man. And yeah, you're not getting that. You're not getting what you, as a fan, were probably promised. But in the same regard, he's not even into the $500 million contract yet. So we can't jump the gun on this. I think there's a very good chance that at some point this season, Vladdy will heat up, because he does heat up very late sometimes. I think the good thing is that this team isn't in an absolute hole where you're thinking, wow, Vladdy only heats up when this team's out of the playoffs. Well, the last couple of years, he didn't have a whole lot of help around him. So he needed to, if he wasn't going, then nobody was. Maybe Bichette. I'll say Bichette. But nobody. This season, he hasn't had to play like that. And now, if he goes out for a month and has an unbelievable stretch late in the season, how pumped up are you that Vladdy may have been awoken right in time for the playoffs? I would be over the moon if that's the case. Again, we'll have to wait and see, but that's sort of the position that's why it's tough to really judge a Vladdy half season so far, because I just don't really know where I stand with him.
I think for me, it's easy to say what Vladdy has done up to this point. It's just like, are you going to call Vladdy season before we play the last 65 games of the season? Because if Vladdy does go off for that last month of the season, that's my only issue. Is there's a lot of what ifs right now. It's what if Vladdy can figure it out? It's what if he gets the power? It's what if he can get on time? It's what if he finds that launch angle? There's too many ifs going around here right now with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Because if you ask a lot of this fan base right now, what Vladdy has done up to this point hasn't been good enough for Vladdy standards, not even including the contract, and the contract hasn't even kicked in, just for what Vladdy needs to do for this Toronto Blue Jays baseball team. If we're getting to the playoffs, I think at this point, I'm not going to say it's a shoe-in because I don't want to jinx the Toronto Blue Jays in a bad scenario like that, but it'd have to be a pretty bad second half, and things would have to go extremely wrong for the Toronto Blue Jays to at least not be flirting for the playoffs. So I think at this point, a lot of people are expecting the playoffs. I'm not sure how fair that is at this point in the season. I'm not fully on board with that yet. Well, I mean, let's be honest, I kind of am. St. Louis Cardinals series, I said that this team was a playoff team. I'm sticking with that. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if somehow this team doesn't make the playoffs, but that is besides the point. If this team is going to go on a deep run, if this team is going to have some success, it's not going to be the Nathan Lucas at-bats. It's not going to be the Ernie Clement at-bats. It's not going to be Alan Roden. It's going to be Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and what he can do in a big scenario, because in a playoff series, there is going to be a time where Vladdy comes up, and whether there's runners on first and second, whether there's bases loaded, whether there's 2 outs, 1 out, whether it's the 9th inning, the 1st inning, whatever it may be, there are going to be a few big scenarios where Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is going to have to put up or shut up. And with his playoff history, again, not a lot of playoff games. He hasn't necessarily been that good. And we haven't seen a lot from him. I guess not a lot from him is a bad way of putting it, but we haven't seen enough from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. up to this point that leads me to believe that if he continues on this production, that this team is going to make any sort of stink in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I don't want to make this all about Vladdy, but he is a big piece, right? He is the biggest piece. And I think the one thing that worries me is the clutch factor in Vladimir Guerrero Jr. because it's been a problem this season. This is a guy that really, besides maybe 1 or 2 games, if he comes up in a big situation where you need a hit, he's not the guy that's going to deliver. And that's scary because I think if you are, quote unquote, the best player on your team in a big situation, whose hands do you want the bat in? Well, Vladdy's hitting in our 3-hole. I think that tells you enough to say that you want the bat in Vlad's hands. But has he proven it enough that he can do it in those situations yet? I don't think so. So that's what's worrying me a little bit. But again, I don't want to just talk about Vladdy. I do want to talk about some of the other guys. And so, Carter, before we take a break, let's continue on another big dog, Bichette. How do you feel?
Yeah, a lot to say with Bichette. I just quickly want to backtrack to Vladdy. One quick thing is that recently with the eye test, like I would be led to the same conclusions that Vladdy hasn't really been that good in the clutch. But with runners in scoring position, he has a 900 OPS. Like that's not bad. That's better than his season OPS. So I think it's just the recency bias is creeping in a little bit there. Like we saw a lot of bad at-bats from Vladdy, especially in that Athletic series. Saw some bad at-bats in that White Sox series as well. So when you go against good pitching, it's a completely different animal. But just with, I guess, the big time factor, maybe like those clutch scenarios where it's like the 8th inning, the 9th inning, in totality, it's not bad in scoring position. But yeah, if you need that big hit with like their best versus your best being Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I think more times than not this season, he has not come out on top of those battles. Yeah,
because for me personally, I don't equate, and maybe this is dumb, but it's the eye test and analytics, right? And we always say we're big eye test guys because with runners in scoring position doesn't always mean a clutch moment, a big situation. Yes, it helps, but you could be up 10-1 with runners in scoring position and, great, Vladdy gets a hit and they drive in a couple more runs. Great, but the game's already over. I'm talking about those situations where it's a 1-run ball game, a 2-run ball game with 2 runners on, and Vladdy has a chance to do something, or a 1-run ball game and Vladdy comes up to the plate with a runner on 1 to keep the train moving with 1 away, but instead he strikes out and it's 2 gone with a runner on 1, and now you've put your team in a hole. So yes, and that's why people like to argue, right, about the Vladdy stuff and about the analytics versus the eye test. Well, that's where the eye test comes in handy for those kind of situations. It's the clutch factor. It's an intangible.
Well, and another reason why people just aren't really liking what Vladdy's doing is the ISO. It's just the power that he's not really hitting for. It's the worst ISO of his career at this point at 157. That is isolated power. That's really what you're solely looking at for those extra base hits, and it hasn't really been there for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. But if you guys have been watching this season, you are well aware of that. So we'll go moving on to Bichette. My biggest question to you is, before getting into all the analytical stuff, is contract-wise, Bichette is still a free agent at the end of the season. We haven't really heard a ton about that, obviously with good reason. Baseball being on, you don't want it to be a distraction. So many other things with that. But in your opinion, has Bichette played himself into a higher value contract, a lower value contract, kind of what you expected? Has that contract value changed whatsoever based off what Bichette has done for you this season?
I mean, maybe. I don't know. Maybe in people that haven't been watching Bichette over the past how many seasons, he had 1 bad year. And an injury-plagued year. So he wasn't going to sign a contract last year anyway. So I don't know. Has it moved from him not signing a contract to now him having to sign a contract? I don't know if the money changed. I don't think so, really. Because I think anybody with a pair of eyes knew exactly what this season was going to bring. And that was the comeback season of Bichette. And that's absolutely what we've been getting. A guy that is 5th in the league in hits again. And he's only 2 off the pace from being 2nd in the league in hits. This guy does the job that you need him to. And we just talked about clutch moments from Vlad. Bichette this season, it's a different story for me. He's a guy that I trust the bat in his hands in a big situation. He's the guy that I want coming up with a big situation. I mean, outside of, what George Springer has done lately, and maybe Alejandro Kirk with his clutch ability. But it's Bichette. Bichette, to me, has been the exact Bichette that I've come to expect over my time as a Blue Jays fan. Bichette is the guy. And so I think a contract's coming. There was somebody on another podcast or something, I don't know if it was on Twitter, whatever it was, that said, Bichette's friend said he's absolutely not signing in Toronto. Shut up.
No, that was from last year.
No, it happened again. Like 3 days ago.
Was there a second one? Oh, really? Yeah. I didn't see that one.
Yeah, it happened again. And I'm like, shut up. Shut up. That is the most BS thing you can say. Bo Bichette has said time and time again that he wants to be a Toronto Blue Jay and he wants to play with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Keegan Matheson. I mean, if you want to talk about a guy you trust with information, it's Keegan Matheson. And Keegan Matheson said, take Bo Bichette straight up. Bo Bichette's not going to the media and lying to you. Bo Bichette, that when he does speak, he's probably telling you the truth. So I don't know. Who do I believe? Random guy on Twitter, random podcast, or Keegan Matheson and Bo Bichette themselves? I don't know. I'm Bo Bichette. I'm all in on Bo Bichette, Carter. I love the guy.
Well, and these are the same guys that are telling you, like, oh, he's going to be a New York Yankee. He's going to be a Los Angeles Dodger. Whereas, as we have seen with Toronto being a fairly big market city, but Bo Bichette doesn't really like the media. So why in the world would he go to one of the biggest media outlets in Major League Baseball, whether it is LA or New York, it could be Boston, wherever it is. If he's going to sign somewhere, it's probably not going to be with this major media company. So I think right now where we're at with Bo Bichette is I would like to see a little bit more power, just a little, like just slightly with the athletic series. He's hit 1 million doubles. So hopefully he can continue with that on after the All-Star break. But yeah, just a little bit more power, especially now that he is hitting, in the second spot, in that fourth spot. He's not just leading off anymore. A little bit more for me is expected from Bo Bichette, but you definitely cannot say it's been a bad year whatsoever from the kid. I think in terms of contract value, I think he is probably right around where I expected. Honestly, maybe a little bit lower even because of that power stick, just because I know contracts are getting higher and higher and higher. But right now, Bo Bichette is sitting at a 112 weighted runs created plus. While that is still good, that is still above average. Is that like deserving of a $300 million contract that we heard some people talk about in that offseason, even 250? When you got Willy Adames making around that 175, 200, I think that's probably still where we're going to see Bo Bichette, unless he does have that Bo Timber. And if he does, oh my goodness, this team is going to be an absolute wagon going into that playoff run. So I think that's a win-win, no matter how you look at it for the Toronto Blue Jays here. But yeah, for what this season has been, I don't think you can necessarily blame Bo Bichette for the success that the Toronto Blue Jays have had, but you can't say that Bo Bichette has been playing bad baseball either.
Yeah, Carter, and obviously, we took a look at the two big dogs, right? But we want to talk about the standouts from this season, that we didn't expect, the George Springers, the Addison Bargers. We're going to talk about them next, plus a little bit on Alejandro Kirk. And then I want to ask you, Carter, how do you feel about the bullpen, the starting pitching, everything? We're going to take a look back at all of that still coming. So stick with us after this short break. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. You guys know I talk about Game Time all the time because it's my favorite ticketing app. It's the only place I buy my tickets. The only place I would want to buy my tickets because they do. They just treat you the best. As a consumer, this is the best place to buy them. We've all been there, logging on early, waiting forever, whether it's a concert, a sporting event, whatever it may be, and you can't keep your spot in line. It keeps kicking you out. The prices are insane. Well, that won't happen with Game Time. Game Time makes getting concert or game tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to game or show time, and you can save up to 60% with their killer last-minute deals. Game Time, that's why I said, whether it's the view from the seat, whether it's the last-minute deals, whether it's the all-in pricing, right? You have nothing to worry about with this ticketing site. I'm telling you guys, use our code because I don't use anything else. I've gotten all my friends to start using Game Time. Because why would you go anywhere else? Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON MLB, locked on MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON MLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So, Carter, continuing on, we talked about the two big dogs, right? Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Bo Bichette. But I wanted to get into the two guys I think that were the most surprising, and it has to be George Springer, the return of the king right now, and then obviously Addison Barger, his absolutely I don't know what you want to call it, unbelievable season, the career starter for him. I don't know. You can use any terms you want, but the kid's been amazing.
He's been unbelievable. That's been exactly what we asked for when we went into this offseason. We were going into the season. We were talking about this team needing that Spencer Horwitz type difference. And we've gotten a whole lot more than what Spencer Horwitz was even giving this Toronto Blue Jays team as well. Because you're getting the power and you're getting it from a left-handed bat, especially with Daulton Varsho and Anthony Santander being out. Going into the season, you would have said that this team, in my opinion, would have had no business being in the spot that they are in right now. I think this would have been another sell-off year. with the current roster, but people are stepping up. Addison Barger being included, George Springer, Alejandro Kirk, Eric Lauer, if you want to go to the starting rotation. Like, you got Yariel Rodriguez, Brendan Little. Like, there is so many different guys that you could point to and said, hey, that guy's been a whole lot better than I thought he was going to be going into this season. That is going to lead to a lot of success. And that's why the Toronto Blue Jays are sitting in the spot that they are right now, is there's been a lot of overachievers on this team. And that's what makes a good baseball team. You get your stars being your stars. You get guys kind of doing their jobs. And then you get a few guys that are better than expected. And then what do you do at the trade deadline? You fill the holes. And that is the direction that the Toronto Blue Jays are headed here. And a lot of that is thanks to, really, I guess you could say in some sense, the new big three. Used to be Kevin Bichette, Bichette, and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Probably still is Bo and Vladdy. But let's say for now, it's George Springer, Addison Barger, and Alejandro Kirk.
Yeah, and you got to give these guys credit. I mean, I don't want to go back to the clutch factor, but when I look at a team moving into the playoffs and you needing a big at bat, well, right now George Springer and Alejandro Kirk are the two most clutch players in this roster right now. If those two come up with their bat in their hand, I'm thinking something might happen, and especially Alejandro Kirk. I know it may not be a moonshot, but he's going to at least keep the line moving, giving you a chance. George Springer, I mean, how many times has he been clutch? That's what I'm looking for at this point. I'm looking for guys that can go out there and do their job on a daily basis, but when push comes to shove, be able to be the big moment. And Alejandro Kirk, not only offense, I know I'll get back to Barger. I know I have to, but now I'm on a tangent again. Alejandro Kirk, not only offensively has he been very, very solid. The defense, I don't know how you up your defense from a very strong defensive catcher and a great framer to now a guy that's throwing runners out consistently, picking runners back off at the bases, heads up baseball, heads up defense. Alejandro Kirk, if it weren't for Cal Raleigh right now, I mean, everybody would be talking about this guy, but instead it's as Blue Jays fans, we have to be the ones that give him the credit. And so I know I'll let you get back to Alejandro Kirk. I'll go back to Addison Barger here quick, but a guy that before this season, Carter, I didn't think this guy would have a roster spot. I was so out on him. I think at one point I legitimately said, I'm out on Addison Barger. I'm done. I just don't see it working. He seems like he can't put it together. And all of a sudden, this kid has put it together. And he has been outstanding. I'm over the moon with his production. And I'm just gonna go over sort of his numbers, Carter, because it's not something I would have ever thought I would say. He's got a 261 average, a 317 on base, a 506 slugging, and an 823 OPS with 13 home runs, 40 RBIs, and that's only in 72 games. I'm blown away by him. And you know what? You said, do I expect him to hit 30 home runs this year? No, but I think if you get high 20s home runs, mid 20s home runs from Addison Barger with Santander, Varsho, Vladdy not heating up 100%. George Springer might put up 30 this year. So, I mean, that's exactly what you needed. We needed another guy that would hit 25 plus home runs, and that very well could be Addison Barger.
Here's my not very hot take. Nobody on the Toronto Blue Jays hitting 30 home runs this year, unfortunately. But you might have a ton of players hitting 20. So what would you rather have? The odd guy hitting 30, or would you rather have kind of back to the 2021 year where you had a million guys hitting 20 home runs? That year was 7. I don't know if they get up to that this year necessarily. But that has been one of the major reasons why this team has been successful. It has been those role players, and it has been those middle of the order bats hitting for power. Whether you look at any of these three guys, I'll start with Alejandro Kirk. I think the biggest thing with him this year is he looks so much more confident behind the plate. He's calling a lot of these games as well, and he has veteran starting pitchers. It's not just, Alek Manoah in his age 23 year. It's Kevin Gausman. It's Chris Bassitt. It's Jose Berrios. Now it's Max Scherzer. And a lot of the time, Max Scherzer, I think a lot of times still calling his own pitches just because of how Max Scherzer is. But Alejandro Kirk looks insanely comfortable behind the plate. For me, surefire Gold Glover. I don't even think it's a question up at this point. I even think for the rest of the season, I almost would throw that for Alejandro Kirk right now. He'd probably be a Silver Slugger as well if a guy in Seattle did not exist. I think that's another one where just, sign that check right now. Like, that we don't have to play the second half. I think Cal Raleigh, even if he didn't play the second half of the season, is probably your Silver Slugger. But that's the jump that we needed from Alejandro Kirk so badly. And that's why it was so frustrating watching him play in 2023 and 2024, because he's having that 2022 caliber of season that we knew was somewhere in there with Alejandro Kirk. When Gabriel Moreno was a part of this team, Danny Jansen was a part of this team, there was a reason that Ross Atkins picked Alejandro Kirk over the other two guys. A younger guy that had the longevity, a guy that Didn't really have any injury concerns, which was a big thing at that time as well. Knew he was good defensively. The biggest thing was how is he going to be offensively, and how is he going to kind of grow into his own game? And up to this point, Alejandro Kirk has been unbelievable to this point in this season. And then Aston Barger, that left-handed bat, just the skill was always there. I think at one point you had him in literally every single mock trade that you made with the Toronto Blue Jays, because there still is that thing, which we'll talk about with the trade deadline, that there is a lot of these major league fringe talent players. We thought Aston Barger was that at that time. I mean, right now, everyday player. I don't care who it's against. His first home run in his major league career off a left-handed pitcher, so giving you a little bit more of a reason now to throw him in there against lefties. Still predominantly will be in there every single time against right-handers, again, depending on the matchup against lefties. But just has been a ton of fun to watch. And we talked about George Springer. We've talked about George Springer a ton recently. Not a great stretch to end it off. I think it was like 2 for 26.
Yeah.
But it's George Springer. Has been a little bit streaky, but if he can be good more than he is bad for the rest of the year, I'm going to be completely okay with that. And we haven't even talked about Ernie Clement. We haven't talked about Nathan Lucas. We haven't talked about Joey Loperfido and his short stints. We haven't talked about a ton of guys on this team. Ernie Clement, probably another guy. I'm not going to say surefire Gold Glover, but I mean, looking at the WARs on this team, Alejandro Kirk leads the team with WAR at 3. Ernie Clement second at 2.7. League average hitter at 100 weighted runs created plus. But is Barry Bonds against left-handed pitching. And that's what this team has done as well this year very successfully, is they've been able to platoon. That has been a huge thing for the Toronto Blue Jays this year, is that they're just playing matchups. You have right-handed pitchers. You know exactly who you're throwing in there. You've got right-handers that are throwing high velo. That can change a little bit as well. You got some guys that spin the ball a little bit better. That might switch what John Schneider's thinking. You got a lefty on the mound that maybe has a weird arm slot. That could completely impact what the lineup looks like. So John Schneider, one of the reasons that he has had a whole lot better of a season is because there's so much more at his disposal now. Whether you look at the bullpen, whether you look at this team in front of you here, that's the thing. We're doing our recap in our one episode, which in typical Locked On Blue Jays fashion, probably go a little bit long here. We haven't even talked about the pitching staff yet, and we're still strictly on this offense. For me, that has been the most surprising part. I thought the thing holding this team back was going to be the offense again. I thought that might be an issue, and they have completely proven me wrong with so many guys contributing day in and day out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Carter, you know what? We'll save the pitching aspect for the next segment here, but I did want to also throw in, you brought him up, John Schneider. Yeah, I was asked on the radio today just my thoughts and feelings on him. And do I still think that has made some iffy calls and stuff that I haven't been pleased with? Yes, absolutely. That's going to happen no matter what team you're a fan of. But I think for the majority of this season, Carter, I have to give John Schneider credit. And I'm going to go over a couple things here. When we needed him to be kicked out in a big situation and to spark some flames, he's done that. Number 2, handling the lineup with success. I think he's done that. He's played guys. He hasn't been waiting. It hasn't been, we'll see if this works out. No, if something's working, he's keeping it going. If it's not working, he's making the switch. Big thing I've asked from John Schneider. And number 3, being a clubhouse guy. He's got these guys' backs, and that's massive. If you have your confidence of your team and the team has confidence in you, I think that goes a long way. And you know, as media guys, I said this earlier on the sports show that I was on. I said for media guys like us, you gotta love John Schneider because he doesn't BS. He shoots from the hip, and pretty much he tells you exactly what he's thinking. So you got to appreciate that as well. So I didn't want to go through this entire episode without giving a little bit of shout out to John Schneider. And I think the job that he's been able to do this year, again, he has had mistakes. I'm not ignoring those, but I think you are seeing the progression from him to becoming a big league manager.
There's a couple of reasons for this, like just looking at the rosters that he had in 2024 and 2025. But in 2024, it felt like every series there was like at least 1 or 2 decisions, even with how bad that team was. Like, oh, that one felt pretty obvious. Oh, why didn't he do this? Why didn't he do that? Whereas this year, again, it's a manager. Like, there's always going to be instances where, as fans, we're like, oh, well, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have done this. Well, there's probably a reason why we're not managers for a Major League Baseball team. It is a very hard thing to do because you got to balance the business of it. You got to put your best team out there, but you also have to manage those players that might have high emotions in that locker room as well. The Toronto Blue Jays pretty lucky. I don't think there's a lot of like those massive emotional guys, but that is something that you kind of have to do as a manager as well. You got to be a little bit of a therapist from time to time. You got to regulate these guys' emotions, especially when things aren't going that well, or maybe are going extremely well. You got to keep these guys' heads focused on the game as well. So credit to John Schneider this year for just not having as many of those, dumb mental errors or like very obvious things that pretty much the entirety of the Toronto Blue Jays fan base was in agreement on a lot of the time in 2024. Was like, hey, why in the hell is this guy doing that? We haven't really had a lot of those moments this year, or at least they have been very minimized up to this point, because nobody's going to be perfect. Everyone is going to make mistakes, whether you're a manager, general manager, player. Obviously, we've made mistakes on this podcast as well. You guys do that in your everyday lives, obviously. So, credit to John Schneider for kind of what he has done this season as well. I guess for this third segment, we'll save the bullpen and the starting pitching. I don't got a ton on the starting pitching. Well, I don't have a ton of the top three in the starting pitching. Do have some for the back end of that rotation. Obviously, Bowden Francis, Alek, Manoah, how that does get thrown into things as well. And then the bullpen, so many things we can talk about. So much still to discuss with you guys, and we'll bring you all of that after this short break.
So, Carter, continuing on here, we didn't get into the pitching. We got a lot more, honestly, to get into. I was just sort of thinking as we were going through this, my yikes, we still, there's a lot we want to cover yet. But let's talk about the starting pitching. And we don't got to talk about every single person, but I think for the majority, we got to talk about one guy in particular that has sort of shocked the world here. And I guess I'll throw it to you, Mr. The Lau Show. We got to talk about him.
I think for me at this point, like Eric Lauer is the savior of the season. I know George Springer's doing crazy things, Aston Barger's doing crazy things, but if you remove George Springer from this lineup, that would suck a whole lot. Don't get me wrong, but I still think there is some avenues that this team can take where they would be successful with some of the production they are getting from some other guys. You take Eric Lauer off this team, I mean, your bullpen's taxed. Like Max Scherzer, again, that kind of worked out as well, but he's only really gone 4 or 5 innings. So you got maybe some other injuries as well because your bullpen's even more taxed. Then you have God knows who for your 5th rotation spot as well. Have to completely cover that, not even talking about the Max Scherzer stuff. So I think the savior of the season has been Eric Lauer. And it's not like he's just eating innings and, going 3 innings here but giving up 4 earned runs, or going 5 innings here and giving up 6 earned runs. He has been one of the most effective pitchers on this Toronto Blue Jays team. I think if you look at just the stats, I know the sample size is a little bit smaller, but out of the starters, I think it has been Eric Lauer, stats-wise, that has been the best pitcher on the Toronto Blue Jays this season. Maybe not looking at the stuff, just looking at simply production on what it takes to win and lose a baseball game. I'm not saying that's going to continue the rest of the season, but for the first half, that's what we're obviously recapping right now. Eric Lauer has been so important to this Toronto Blue Jays team and one of the biggest reasons why that the Toronto Blue Jays are, again, leading the AL East.
Yeah, you got to give them all the props in the world. Honest to God, I mean, I think it was 2.7 ERA so far.
Right.
2.78, I believe it is, throughout the first, whatever, I'll say half of the season. He really has been outstanding. He has come up in a situation where this team needed somebody to take that and just run away with it. So yeah, absolute hat tips to Eric Lauer when this team needed somebody to fill in for that spot. Because Bowden Francis, I mean, he was just tough to watch this season, and you needed Eric Lauer before Max Scherzer came back, but you still needed somebody to fill in the 5th rotation spot. So good for him on taking that one. And I guess, Carter, the next person I want to talk about is a little bit Max Scherzer. I know we've talked about him a ton already. And this isn't giving him super props because he hasn't pitched that much, but I think we're in a tough spot where, again, you need Max Scherzer to now get you innings. And he's sort of starting to do that, thank God, because if you went this entire season and Max Scherzer was out the whole year, we'd be in a tough position again, because, again, you have to burn bullpens. Maybe you have to rely on Bowden Francis. Maybe you're bringing up random guys from AAA or AA or whatever they're from. But instead, you have Max Scherzer at least giving you something. So I'm not saying it's a good thing. I think it definitely could have went better. But I think at this point, I'm happy with it, that at least he's doing okay, I guess.
Yeah, it depends how you look at this Max Scherzer stuff. If you're looking at it from a full season perspective, not good, obviously. Yeah. Like, not enough production. It's not enough availability. That's the biggest issue when you sign a guy for $15.5 million. The Toronto Blue Jays, as did we knew the risks going in. This is just, the bad way things could have went. But my expectations kind of going into the season was that Max Scherzer was going to be a guy that was going to give you 4 to 5 innings. You got 6 in his last start. So I think for me, I was a little bit higher on Max Scherzer, you as well, than a lot of other people were. Maybe that was a little bit of foolery from us because the way it kind of did pan out. And there still are some issues with Max Scherzer. Still has some nagging thumb injuries. Every time it seems like he gets off the mound, he is either looking at something, complaining about something, or having some soreness. Maybe that does come with being 40 years old as well. But it has been very nice to see with Max Scherzer being back, especially now with you talk about Fastest. He's injured. So even if whether it's been good or bad, a lot of it has been bad. Couldn't even help you if you wanted to because he can't throw a baseball right now. So that's why Max Scherzer, Eric Lauer, especially Eric Lauer, but Max Scherzer now coming back. And maybe for the playoffs, a guy that has been through it a time or two, obviously, has won a World Series in his time. So that is very beneficial to a Toronto Blue Jays team that doesn't really have a lot of playoff experience, especially when you're looking at the superstars in Anthony Santander, if he ever does come back. But Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., these guys have made the playoffs, but haven't gone far into the playoffs. So definitely nice to have some guys around that can do that. And just out of a bullpen role as well. We've seen Max Scherzer still has the stuff. He still has the ability to be a productive pitcher at the major league level. It's just, can he give you the longevity? And that's something that is really being tested right now. But we're in a lot better of a spot than we were even like a month and a half ago when we're looking at this starting rotation. But when we talk about surprises, I mean, you can go and look at this bullpen as well. Even with the injuries, there has been a ton of surprises, a ton of people overachieving, and has probably been the strongest suit. Maybe this in the offense. That's a little bit of a debate that we could have for a different time, but very good bullpen up until this point in the season. Two guys that the first guys you got to think of, the overachievers, staying with that thought process. Two guys that have just been ridiculous this year. One guy from the left side, one guy from the right side. I'll leave you the right side guy, and I'll take Brendan Little. The things like, again, it's not as much with the Addison Barger stuff, but there was some underlying stats that did point to Brendan Little being a lot better this season. Not as good as he has been, but being better. Last year, he had a ridiculous fly ball home run rate. Pretty much every other fly ball he was giving up was going for a home run. So a lot of just unluckiness being accumulated with Brendan Little here as well. And then just the knuckle curve. It seems like it was a very good pitch in 2024. That was another thing. You saw the stuff with it. But being one of the best pitches is not the best pitch in all of baseball right now. Absolutely insane stuff. The whiffs that he's getting on that pitch, just from the eye tests. Like, Brendan Little doesn't even have to throw strikes. And he, at one point, was throwing the least amount of strikes out of any major league pitcher playing right now this season. So shout out to Brendan Little, especially when you're looking at the start of the season, you thought, hey, what might be a problem in the bullpen? Oh, it might be a higher leverage reliever from that left side. And that has been probably the strongest suit of the Toronto Blue Jays bullpen up to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Big hat tips to Brendan Little, a guy that I am super, super pumped up about. I mean, his stuff is so gross, Carter, that watching him is so much fun. But talking about my guy, Yariel Rodriguez, a guy that I had so much hope for last season. He couldn't put it together, even though, again, I think you saw he had the stuff. It's just the command just wasn't there. And this team, I think, ideally, they wanted him as a starter. But if you are going to get the production from Yariel Rodriguez in this bullpen, he debatably could be your closer, Carter. That people could have that debate with me, and I would be okay with it. He has been that good. And in outings where they ask him to go out and do multiple innings, and he's fine. He's got that dog mentality. It looks like nothing shakes him now. Whereas last year, you saw maybe if he got hit up a little bit, he would sort of lose that confidence. This year, he is all confidence, that guy. I don't think I've seen that guy, shiver. I don't think I've seen that guy move in a way that he didn't want to move. He is looking fantastic. I did want to give another shout out to Brayden Fisher as well, Carter, because another guy that, we asked for diamond in the rough side of this bullpen. Well, Brayden Fisher is your absolute diamond in the rough. He has been outstanding as well.
Yeah, a guy that some people have even been saying, not this season, but a guy that could have that starting pitcher trajectory if he can be stretched out. We already have seen multiple inning appearances from Brayden Fisher. Again, don't touch him this year with a 10-foot pole, but if that is something that you want to experiment with some guys coming off the books here in this offseason, that is a very far time away, but an interesting thought-provoking question there from some people in Toronto Blue Jays media. But just going down the Toronto Blue Jays bullpen list, like, you can look at, again, including the guys that are on the injured list, but maybe not as confident in Jeff Hoffman. I was going to say confident in guys that can get you zeros. I'm still confident Jeff Hoffman can get me a zero, but after the first three pitches, I'll be either a lot more confident or a lot less confident. Still, having some remnants of, I guess, Jordan Romano in this Toronto Blue Jays bullpen here. Some good and some bad. Good with the saves, bad with the blowups, obviously. But Yimi Garcia, Brennan Little, Yariel Rodriguez, even Chad Green recently has been a lot better that we haven't even really had a chance to talk about on the regular podcast. But Brayden Fisher, Mason Fluharty, the season that he had, again, not going to talk about him probably anymore. Fallen soldier, Mason Fluharty, he fell on his sword, so the Toronto Blue Jays could be at the top of the AL East. So I think that's a trade-off that he, us, and all Toronto Blue Jays fans will take as well. Just kind of embracing that committee approach. A lot of just bullpen arms that you can throw out there and be very confident that they will give you a good outing.
Yeah, Carter. I mean, we don't even mention guys that are on the IL, i.e. Yimi Garcia, Nick Sandlin. Those two guys have been unbelievable. Ryan Burr, haven't sadly gotten to see a lot from him.
Yeah, 60-day IL, not looking good. That's the injury update.
Yeah, is not looking good. But Nick Sandlin looks excellent. You can seem to throw him wherever you need to. And Yimi Garcia, I mean, he's looked really good as well. It's too bad that he had to go down with injury again, but hopefully we'll see him back very soon as well. But Carter, in saying all of that, I know that was rapid fire a little bit, but we don't want to have you guys sitting here for 4 hours listening to us. And this definitely could have been 4 hours. So I guess before we end things off here, I know you wanted to touch on the upcoming schedule, just for the remainder of the season. And plus we got to give our season grades, Carter. Or half-season grades, I should say.
Yeah, I was going to go more in depth on this strength of schedule stuff, but I'll just kind of go over it and just where a lot of these teams do sit, at least in the AL East. I didn't even bother with the Orioles. That's kind of where I'm at with them. That was my division winner, by the way, at the start of the season. Good job, Carter. I got the right idea with the way the division's playing out, with just like how close a lot of the teams are, but just teams are all over the place, unfortunately, for my predictions there. But anyway, strength of schedule. The Red Sox, they do have the hardest schedule for the rest of the season. So if you're looking for something that is a little bit of positive news for the Toronto Blue Jays, that is it there. The Jays have the 11th hardest, so kind of in the middle of the pack there. Not the worst thing for the rest of the year. The Rays are at 19. The Yankees are at 20th. The Orioles, who cares? They could be playing Little League teams for the rest of the year. That pitching staff is absolutely horrific. So I think that should be a team that sells at the trade deadline. Probably won't matter for the Toronto Blue Jays much anyway, because it is in division. Even if they do get players from the Orioles, probably going to have to pay at a premium there. But good thing for the Red Sox. Hopefully we'll have a bunch of tough series coming up for a team that luckily has the All-Star break now. Very bad time to get the All-Star break when you're on a 10-game win streak. Wouldn't have been happy. That was the Toronto Blue Jays just a couple of weeks ago. But a little bit of some positive news there, at least in the strength of schedule front. But the stuff I was going to get into is how much does that really matter? Because there's so many different things that go into it. Well, I will save that for our Friday episode. But just start of the season grades. So there's a bunch of different ways that we could do this. We're just going to throw it all in one. Just the Toronto Blue Jays from what we expected to where they are right now. Just in totality, I think for me, when we're looking at this Toronto Blue Jays team, it's the way they're doing it. If I go too into depth here, if I look at Vladdy, if I look at Santander, my grade goes down a little bit, but I'm pretty okay with throwing them at an A- here. I almost want to throw them at an A. I'm going to throw them at an A-. Being at the top of the AL East, massive, obviously. But I do have a little bit of doubts in me that how much can this team continue to produce, especially offensively, with some of the guys that they have got it from. The narrative around this Toronto Blue Jays team has been, how have they been doing it? And I've kind of had some of those questions myself. I don't think these guys are going to fall off the face of the earth necessarily, but I do think that the Toronto Blue Jays will be a playoff team. I still think that, but I still think there will be obviously some ups and downs in the road. But up to this point, can't really complain about much whatsoever. I'm still going to leave them at an A- though.
Yeah, I'm going with an A. And that's just for the simple fact that I did not think there was a chance in hell would have frozen over before this team was first place in the AL East. So I don't care. I think I have the same feelings as you do. That is this sustainable? I'm going to say maybe not, but I do think that if we're just looking from the start of the season to now and how much this team has surprised me, shocked me, and impressed me, I got to go with an A. And not an A+, because I don't think this is a team that's unbeatable and World Series bound necessarily. But yeah, I've been more than impressed. And I was very worried going into this year. So hat tips to the boys. Absolutely great first half of the season. We'll see if they can continue it, Carter, but we've held the people long enough, don't you think?
Not long enough yet. Anyway, I got two more questions for you. Second half MVP, just quickly, who do you got on that one?
Vladdy.
I would love that. I mean, I hope it happens.
I need it to be. That's simple as that. I need Vladdy to be Vladdy. And if he's not, then, well, I don't know how this season goes. You need your best players to be your best players. You need Vladdy to be your best player. Simple as that.
See, I'm going to go with Bichette. I think we still haven't seen everything that we have seen from Bichette with the contract stuff going on. I think not quite the Bo Timber, but I think we do have some good things coming for Bichette in the future. And then just my last question kind of goes along with what we were talking about before. Right now, the Toronto Blue Jays sit atop of the AL East. I know if the season ended right now, obviously they would be first in the AL East. But by the time the playoffs do come, are the Toronto Blue Jays AL East winners in your book? Yes or no?
No.
Damn. That sucks. I agree. not ideal. Again, I said this team is for sure a playoff team. I'm all in on the playoffs at this point. They should be a playoff team. You got the fifth highest payroll in all of baseball. A lot of things are actually going better this year. That does obviously jump into it. But the trade deadline will reveal a lot. And I might have to completely eat my words in 2 weeks, depending on what the Toronto Blue Jays do. But just with how aggressive I think the Yankees are going to be with the Red Sox now, I think how aggressive that they might be. And just with some of their top-end talent compared to what our top-end talent has been up to this point, if some things do happen, I can see the Toronto Blue Jays winning this division, but those things need to happen. And they haven't yet happened this year. A lot of it has been Vladimir Guerrero Jr. If you get that breakout, maybe this team does find themselves at the top of the AL East. But for me, I think things have been going just a little bit too good. I think the Toronto Blue Jays and their fan base needs to take a step back. We got to go through a little bit of heartache, which hopefully we can get it out of the way earlier on in the second half. And, it doesn't happen, mid-September when they were trying to think about a playoff run and a playoff series.
Yeah, I just think a lot of players have overperformed. I don't necessarily believe that everybody can keep this up. And so, but if Vlad and Bo both step up, then you don't need those guys to be on this unbelievable.
That pretty much is it's just carrying the team. That's what we're looking for from our superstars. Instead of the bottom 6 guys carrying the team, let's have the top 3 guys do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's that easy. Leave us your comments, thoughts, and feelings on everything and how this first half of the season's went. How do you feel this team is going to continue through the second half? I know we've kept you guys a long time, but that's just, it's just classic with us.
Yeah,
thanks for
going into this third segment was like, let's keep it under 5 minutes. I'm like, have you done a podcast? Now we're at 17 after the third segment, but that is where we're going to cap it off here. We still have another trade deadline episode coming to you guys. For tomorrow's episode, we'll focus on the position players around the league. There are a lot of big names available as well, so be sure to check out that episode coming at you guys on Friday. We obviously will not recap, but go over the first series after this All-Star break, and that is against the San Francisco Giants. Going to be a little bit of a tough series coming out of that break. But Brayden, throwing it back over to you for the last time, at least of this episode. Is there anything else you want to add before we do take off?
No. I think let's just hope and pray as Toronto Blue Jays fans that this continues. That's it. Let's bring the vibes. We're all back. We're all in on this team. We'll see what they do at the trade deadline. A lot more to come from us. Hit the subscribe button. Stay tuned for a lot more from the Locked On Blue Jays boys here.